If you're Jewish, even if you've just been to Jerusalem, you will know that this is the most sacred Jewish site of all, even though there's a Muslim mosque on top of it. It is Temple Mount, and one of its remaining walls, the western one, is where Jews from around the world come to pray, being the closest they can now get to where God supposedly created Adam, where Solomon built the first temple of the Jews, and where the Romans destroyed the second in 70 AD and stole its treasures, as pictured on the Great Arch of Titus in Rome today. And then 600 years later, Muslim conquerors took that Jewish site, built their own mosque on top, and Jews can no longer pray there. Yet despite that long Jewish history, UNESCO, the United Nations cultural arm, last week handed down this decision, referring to this site only by its Muslim names, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Al-Haram al-Sharif, and referring to it only as a Muslim holy site of worship. Well, joining me is Labor MP Michael Danby, former editor of the Australian Israel Review. Michael, it's great to see you, but listen, China, Russia, voting with the Muslim members of UNESCO on their council to get this motion through over the objections of the United States, over the objections of other Western countries. What is the significance of this resolution?
Well, I think it's meant to authorise a Palestinian campaign that Jerusalem is the capital of an Islamic State of Palestine. It really alienates the rest of the world. It's trying to deauthorise our common, Andrew, Judeo-Christian heritage. I mean, this is, after all, the site of thousands of cultural. You pointed to the Arch of Titus, but there are all of these paintings of the Passion of Christ in the temple courtyards, etc. Was all of this invented? Was Judaism invented to preempt Islam? I mean, Islam only came into existence in the 6th century. Judaism existed for thousands of years beforehand, and Christianity for many centuries beforehand. So to describe the holiest site for Judaism, that where people mention it every day in their daily prayers, as a Muslim site, is an ideological attempt to authorise what the Palestinians are trying to do. And it's terrible, as you pointed out, to see countries like China and Russia vote with, crooked quasi-Islamist regimes like Malaysia to claim that this is solely an Islamic city. It's interestingly enough, Andrew, both Mexico has repudiated their support for this, and I'm amazed that a Christian country like Brazil would vote for a resolution like this. It's astonishing, and it undermines the basis of our common culture. This is, after all, where Jesus appeared in the temple courtyard.
No, you're quite right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think actually Islam was invented in the 7th century, not the 5th, but I might be wrong there. But what is the future of Israel when something like this can happen even at UNESCO, the United Nations big cultural thing, over the objections, may I say, of its boss? She said, this is wiping it. You can't wipe out Jewish and Christian history like this. What does it say? Russia, China, growing in power, managing to side with these countries and get this through?
Well, I wouldn't be too worried about the Israelis. They're an island of industry, technology, vitality, one of the happiest countries I've ever visited, in a sea, in a morass of hatred and war in practically all of the surrounding countries. I think they're doing very well in Asia, less so in Europe. In Asia, where people, do business with other countries on the basis of they don't have any racial prejudice. So I do think you're right, though, to point to a cultural shift. I think since we've had the Obama presidency, there is a pushback by all of these authoritarian regimes using the Islamic bloc in the United Nations to disparage our civilization, our culture. And I'm not talking about just Jewish culture. I'm talking about Europe. And it's very sad to see Russia and China participating in this. But I think the Israelis point to the fact that there are 10 less countries who supported this time than the previous time. So again, I don't think it's going to actually affect anything on the ground in Jerusalem, except it is part of an ideological campaign that an Islamist ideology is concerning the whole world.
Look, it's a part of a delegitimizing of Israel, obviously, but it's also, to me, it seems a growing axis of authoritarianism, particularly as America grows weaker. That's what really worries me, and that is now translating into the world's super government, so to speak. Now, here's the thing, Michael. I haven't heard the Turnbull government say anything about this. Now, does that disappoint you?
It does, but to be fair to them, Australia's not a member of the UNESCO governing board. We are applying to join the UN
I'm not a member, and
Council.
I'm saying something. Yeah.
Good on you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to say it too. But that's the kind of country Australia is. I would have expected a bit better from the government. They are joining the UN Human Rights Council. I was lucky to be there recently and gave them both barrels for not discussing the bombing of their own UN human rights convoy trying to get into Aleppo and spending the previous 3 days discussing Palestine. I said this is a kind of strange emphasis when you organise a UN convoy to relieve civilians in Aleppo and you say nothing about it and you spend the whole time of the previous 3 days discussing the issue of Palestine. Seems a strange set of priorities to me.
Yeah, well, listen, one of the things is, of course, Michael, that this, I think, reflects a wider problem that concerns me, and that's the rise of identity politics at the UN, here in Australia too. And when you get that, Jews are on their, with this idea of Jews on their own, Muslims on their own, you're outnumbered. You are outnumbered. You don't have the votes there, you don't have the votes here. And I'm just wondering, given all that, one of the aspects of identity politics that obviously concerns me is these new laws to restrict our ability to critique people of other cultures or those other cultures themselves. Now, I'm just wondering whether Jewish leaders should now rethink their support of the Racial Discrimination Act and allow more free speech, like the owner of the Australian Jewish News, Robert Magid, now says that should happen, more free speech.
Well, there's a lot of views in the Jewish community on 18C. You know that I think that the judge over-interpreted the law in your case. I've said that before, and I've written it before. But look, there are very strong grounds for protecting people from harassment and intimidation. Of course, look, Australia isn't quite as bad as Europe or some other politically correct countries where these kind of things can't be discussed. We do make fun of people. I don't think identity politics has taken over 100% here, and it's a legitimate debate about 18C. People of goodwill like you and I might have differences in emphasis about it, and I think that. The judge in your case made a mistake in interpreting former Attorney General Larcher's law.
Yeah, but forget about my case, because as soon as you add my name to it, the left doesn't really want to know about changing the law. I'm bad, and so a law that censors me, that's good.
Oh, but isn't that silly,
I'm talking
Andrew?
more about the university.
Don't you have a whole lot of lefties who appear on your program now? I mean, Kimberly Kitching appears on your program.
Brave. You're a new colleague, mate. But no, I'm worried more about those Queensland University technology students. They don't have an employer backing them. Sued for $250,000 under this law. Bill Leak now sued for a cartoon. You must now recognise, surely, that this law has to change.
Yes, but I don't think either of those two people have been convicted. There's also this section 18D where people can make legitimate political comment, and I'm not sure that those Queensland University students or Bill Leak would or indeed should be convicted under the existing law. Why don't we see how it plays out? And I suspect 18D will be the escape clause for both of them.
Well, it might, but you've already had 3 other students settle for $5,000 because they don't want to go through the hell that these other students have gone through. You can't subject people to punishment by process. They may well win, but they lose in the sense that they have gone through more than a year of this hell and the legal bills and the worry and the stress and the preparation. You can't have that, Michael. But listen, before we go, this is really important as well. I want your view on it because you're a long watcher of the Middle East. As we speak, Russians and Syrians are carpet bombing Aleppo, almost carpet bombing Aleppo. Now, that was once the biggest city in Syria, still hundreds of thousands of people there, many of them children. Are you amazed that there is no outcry about this?
I bow to no one, Andrew, in being a critic of Sunni Islamists, of jihadists. But I think what's happening to the Sunni Muslim people in Aleppo is a war crime. To send bunker busters into hospitals so that the people of that city are driven to flee to Europe. It does all go back to the weakness of President Obama in failing to flatten those Syrian chemical factories when he gassed his own people. The Syrian Air Force therefore flew. The Russians have come in since. It's a terrible situation, and it's leading to all of these people fleeing to Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan, and then on to Europe, and causing all of the problems there, Andrew. So, you know, when people say, oh, it's the Middle East, it's too difficult to deal with, the fact that we didn't deal with giving the majority in Syria, the Syrian Muslim people, an opportunity to at least flee to safe zones within their own countries, is a terrible indictment of the Obama presidency. It's his version of what's happened at Srebrenica, and I think it'll be a legacy that is
worse.
He's remembered for, and very unfortunate. I hope a new President Clinton will do what she promised and set up safe zones in northern Syria and on the Jordanian border, where at least the Syrians can go to some place in their own country.
Yeah, Michael, look, but I think we're back where we started, aren't we? There's a new axis of authoritarianism challenging a weaker West, and you've seen that play out in Syria. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.